The boys are back in town. The boys are back in town. The boys are, in fact, back in town. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Driveline Academy Podcast, the world's most dangerous youth baseball podcast. I'm your Marvel Mouth host, Devin Morgan, Director of Baseball Driveline, founder of Driveline Academy, and I'm joined, as per usual, back in the saddle by my brother, my partner, my co-host, Driveline Academy Assistant Director, Driveline Academy International Man of Mystery, Washington's most eligible bachelor, Jeremy Tectiel.
And appreciate last week you not throwing me under the bus because I overslept my flight. You made it seem like it was planned, like I was supposed to, continue my Thanksgiving celebration.
I didn't want to put that.
Your boy overslept his flight. That's 4:30 a.m. flight. One of these times it was bound to happen.
Yeah, I mean, stuff happens.
Yeah.
Stuff happens. And I swear, I don't know about you, but the west to east travel kills me. It always.
Well, I do the red eye back, and then the earliest flight I can get home to Seattle, so that I can try to manage the time difference as much as possible. And only a matter of time before I would just sleep through that 2 a.m. alarm.
Yeah, we can't always catch W. Sometimes you got to catch an L every once in a while. Just remember what it feels like.
Big L. Yeah.
So as per usual, we'll get through the housekeeping. Axbat.com, code DL20, D as in dinosaur, L as in Legolas, the arrow shooting dude from Lord of the Rings. Axbat.com, it's the holiday season. You're listening to a baseball-related podcast. They have baseball-related training products. It seems like this is a match made in heaven, and you're going to get 20% off. Disclaimer. It's possible that Axe might be running their own promo stuff where you're going to get a steeper discount than that 20%. Certainly, I would like to suggest that you should find a way to use our 20% because that is the mechanism by which we get funds to go directly into our scholarship pool, which we then use not to provide lavish gifts for ourselves and our significant others or romantic paramours, but instead we do it to have kids be here for no cost or reduced cost. So if you want to support that initiative, axbat.com, code DL20, Dinosaur Legolas. I don't know where that came from today, but you can use that to get 20% off. Next off is all the Driveline specific related stuff for either you're a first-time listener or a last-time listener. If this is the podcast that pisses you off, you should know we have a variety of training products now where you can engage with the Academy and not be on one of our teams. The best way to get started really in either our Florida or Arizona or the Washington location, and probably come in for the power hour. It's a 60-minute free hitting session. Yes, I did say free as in free 99. You're going to come in and experience what we call as a programmatic session where it has basically a program that it follows every one, and it's not entirely dissimilar to a lot of the ways that our teams train when they're doing hitting, right? You're going to come in and do some kind of drill-focused work. You're going to be challenged, and then you're going to compete. Power Hour basically runs that same way. You can do 2 of those for free if you just sign up. It's a great way to get started. From there, you can platform onto things like the Driveline Academy Snapshot. It's a 90-minute biomechanic assessment for youth players. A distilled-down version of the same one that our college and pros go through. So your youth player is not like a league MVP or first ballot Hall of Famer or any of those other type of extraordinary trainees that we've had that go through the full-blown assessment. The snapshot assessment is different than that for youth players. We really want to focus on the big levers that we could turn, right? What's the lowest hanging fruit that can help your athlete improve their performance both in the current term and then set them up for long-term performance in terms of skills at scale, which is the other thing that you can do is you can buy the Skills at Scale book. But yeah, if you're close enough to a facility, the Snapshot's really kind of a no-brainer. I'll just put this out there. We're also going to do a discount on Snapshots, 50% off during the winter holiday break. We're starting that. It's going to be running, I think, from December 23rd to January 5th. The word is going to get out today to our CR and our sales staff. So we're publishing the podcast early now. We're publishing on Tuesdays instead of Fridays.
Happy Tuesday.
The people demanded it. I guess it makes my life easier to publish on Tuesdays, so we're doing Tuesdays. So if you get this tomorrow, which would be December 10th, and you're like, I want some of that action at 50% off, our sales staff and CR should know by that point. So we're doing 50% off. 4 snapshots are booked from the 23rd into the 5th. And if you like that experience, you're like, hey, I want to do that every 6 weeks, and I also want to come into a Driveline gym 4 to 5 times a month, then we have Driveline Academy Flex. Point being, we just got a bunch of ways we want to make this program more accessible to more kids, to do more good, to help show you and show them what the path looks like to being a competitive baseball player for a longer period of time than just like when you're swinging like a drop 12 USA bat.
Yep.
And that might be applicable to some of you right now, and that's okay. But it changes significantly over time. The game changes, the equipment changes. You got to have the stuff to be able to kind of compete with that and stay playing the game. Baseball is really fun when you're good, and it sucks when you're non-competitive, so we're trying to give you that type of insight for basically as cheap as we can do it. So we got all that stuff. Okay. Housekeeping done. Water bags 2.0. So I had the privilege of talking about water bags without Jeremy being here, and he reminded me of a hilarious conversation that took place at ABCA last year that I don't think we should really...
No, I'm not going to go into it.
We're not going to put that out, but I know you have some more stuff on the water bags than I think it's appropriate for us to get into.
So it's not water bag specific, necessarily. And maybe I'm wrong here. You can tell me if I'm wrong. But this is more related to... your child's, any child, seeing training content on social media.
Yeah.
How often does Paul Skeens post training?
Himself?
Did he post? He posted the water bag video, right?
I think somebody posted him. So there was video from him using it in season, like pregame warm up.
Okay.
And then I think some other people have posted it in terms of like an off-season training modality that he uses.
Okay. Changed my question a little bit, but I think a large part of as I was listening to the pod, a large part of the thing that I think wasn't talked about by you and the ghost of me that was not sitting in this chair was the motivations of posting online.
Well, sure.
You see an athlete with a water bag. What is the motivation for them posting that video of a water bag? Do they post all of their training?
Right.
Or just this piece?
Right.
Right. Is it a new thing? Like, one can generally assume that athletes aren't posting every hour, every minute that they train. So when they do post something,
yeah,
my assumption, I think the reasonable assumption, is that it's a novel training idea or something they specifically believe in, something they're endorsing perhaps, something new they're trying, whatever it is. Not, hey, this is the same training that I do 99% of the time.
Right.
Because that stuff doesn't get posted.
Well, and a lot of the meat and potato stuff isn't particularly exciting.
Right.
Right.
I mean, you're missing 99.9% of what Paul Skeens does if we're focusing on the one or two clips of a water bag that we've seen.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm not going to say it's nefarious, because I don't think it's nefarious, but like, there's definitely an element of kids not quite understanding, and adults, not quite understanding like motivations that go into social media posts. And like jumping to the conclusion of, I should try a water bag, not, I should be doing what he does off camera.
Yeah.
Like the other 99% of his training, if I replicated that, I promise you I wouldn't need water bags.
Yeah.
Like, you're also right in that he's a professional athlete who's 6'7", 260, 70, 80 pounds, whatever he is. Like, your kid shouldn't train like that. But also, I think like the larger thing that I think of when I see these types of things is like, why did you post that specific clip of you training? Are you promoting water bags? Do you feel like it actually really helped you? You know, things like that, where like most of the time the answer is probably going to be like they're promoting water bags or some piece of equipment or gear that they're using, as opposed to like, I am telling you that like Paul Skeens, got really good at throwing a baseball by using water bags. Like, that's not true.
Right.
Like, he might have posted it because, hey, I'm trying this out. Okay, well, trying it out, and you got to throwing 100 miles an hour consistently via another method. Like, if you're already throwing 100, honestly, you do probably need some extra stimulus if you're trying to continue to make gains.
Sure.
So maybe that is a point where you're like, yeah, let me try water bags.
Sure.
This is weird. I've never tried this before. Let me see if I can get some scrape some gains out of it here, which your kid does not need to do.
No, and again, to that exact point, you know, we talk about the snapshot is right. We want to target like the lowest hanging fruit, right? We want to target like the big lever that you can turn.
Right.
There isn't a 12-year-old in this country who has like a one-to-one relationship about the levers that they can turn with Paul Skeens. That doesn't exist.
Right.
Like, just straight up, that's not a thing. And I think you're also 100% right that, you know, that the commerce part of it is It's in the mix, man. Like, it's in the mix. And I think, look, to be honest, I think we're just as guilty of that as anybody else, right? Like
100%. Yeah.
Like
we post some cool stuff, but not the boring stuff that makes up the bulk of what we do and how you actually get better.
Right. Like, I filmed videos leading into our Black Friday Cyber Monday for the Youth Power Bat and the Youth Underload Smash Bat. The morning of, I put a gigantic divot in my head when I was shaving my head, which I now have a scar. So I literally had like a giant like ace bandage on my head and then put a hat over it. So hopefully you didn't see that. And I don't know, it felt, I actually had some thoughts the night before, like knowing I was have to go out and like shoot an ad. Mm-hmm. And I was like, is this like, am I cool with this? Like, at my core, am I good with like being the sales guy? And because I think a lot of the stuff that I put out for content wise, it's sales adjacent. And I think we can be honest about that. Like, to be frank, when I'm showing a video of Danny hitting 88.5 off the bump, that's sales adjacent.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
I know that.
I feel like I compare us in my mind a lot to school. Because like we call ourselves an academy. We try to teach things. There's learning and growth. And like, how would a school advertise to get a kid to come in?
Right.
They're not going to show doing homework for 3 hours a night.
No.
Or like a super stressed out kid pulling an all-nighter the night before a test. Like, they're not going to show that stuff.
Yeah.
They're going to show the college acceptance letter or, the NGPA or whatever it is. They're going to show the result and not the actual...
Yeah, you're right.
The journey to get there. And I think that's like a reasonable thing. Like, no one watches the ads wondering about the journey. On the same... Yeah. Well, I guess maybe not no one. But like, on the flip side of that coin, we do have to be careful of like making kids think that the end is achievable without like the middle part. Or that like there are shortcuts, there's easy ways to get to that end without doing the middle. And like, nobody wants to watch an ad where someone does pivot picks for 7 years. 2 years, right? Like, I understand that nobody wants to watch that ad, but that is actually what you're going to get. So like, I do think we generally do a good job not selling like immediate gains. Like, I don't think that we are those people. But I do think that like kids especially, we talk about they're not capable of abstract thought, or they're not as good of abstract thought as adults are, even though most adults aren't capable of it either. Yeah. But like, they're going to see these posts and like, they're much less capable than we are of thinking, oh, like there's definitely like some context missing in this video that I just watched. Yeah. It's no, I see, Paul Skeen's water bag, therefore water bag makes me throw hard. And like, we're going to jump to that conclusion, even though your son pretty intimately understands training. Yeah. And what kind of training you need to go through to become Paul Skeens.
Yeah. And and the way that I kind of like made sense in my own head is, look, the reason that we made the Power Bat and the Youth Underload Smash Bat is because they're tools that we wanted. Like we had a Smash Bat on the floor that was too heavy for our younger kids.
Right.
Like, okay, well, I need a different thing. Right. Okay, well, let me call up Jay at Axbat. Let me talk to Brendan at Axbat. Hey, I got this idea. Yeah. I got a thing that we want to make. Okay, cool. And then, hey, we had a 2-bat system for speed training. And that system was predicated on literal decades of research that established that like overload bat speed training works.
Yeah.
And I think it just works.
I think there's a reasonable difference between like trying to sell equipment, like training equipment, training gear, that I would say the reasonable understanding is like you use this thing consistently. Mm-hmm. This isn't like you use it once and you're immediately going to get better. You use it consistently. Now, whether once they actually buy the bat, they're using it 5 times a week or it collects dust in their garage is a different case. But like with a piece of equipment, in a lot of ways, the customer understands that like I have to use this consistently.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't know that always is the case with certain types of training as opposed to types of equipment.
Yeah, I know. I understand what you're saying.
So like water bag training, I don't think the athlete immediately, like if we showed like the Smash Bats to an athlete. I think the athlete would generally, a youth athlete would understand, like, oh, I have to swing this for like a month or whatever, like not just like one time.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's true with like the training types, like water bag training or things like that. I think in a lot of cases, athletes think that can replace the other training.
It's a hack, right?
It's a hack. And like, sure, if you want, like, I don't have enough data to tell you water bags are going to make you worse.
Yeah.
We may have enough data to tell you water bags aren't going to make you better. They're not the most efficient thing to make you better. But, like, I don't know if they're going to make you worse necessarily.
Sure.
So, like, that's go and add that to your training. Right? Like, see what happens. Mm-hmm. If you feel you need an extra stimulus, try it. Try it, collect some data, let me know if it works for you.
Yeah.
It's when you get into this is going to replace consistent hard work.
Yeah.
That is when I start to get worried. And I don't think anybody thinks buying a bat is going to replace consistently swinging because you're buying a bat. I have to consistently swing this bat. Whereas I do think it oftentimes those types of things, the water bags, different types of training hacks, if you will, the athlete starts to think that, oh, if I just train in this way instead of the way I'm training, and it's like Paul Skeens doesn't only train with water bags.
Yeah, and that's the tricky thing, right? Is if the message that you receive is that like, well, I don't have to get good at squatting, kettlebell squats, air squats, barbell squats of any variation, and you're like, well, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna like hack my way around that. I don't know that you're gonna. I don't know that you're gonna land. I don't know that you're like the place that you're gonna land.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like the water bags are like Weight Watchers or something.
Yeah,
where it's like use this and lose X amount of pounds in 2 months, and then like, in the small print on the bottom it says like also you need to like exercise regularly if you're gonna do this program and lose weight, and it's like the water bag might help you, but not if you don't actually do any of the other stuff in this time period also. Yeah,
and then, what we did talk about yesterday or last week is, well, now you get to the critical part of, like, it's choose your own adventure. You only have so much time.
Correct.
You only have so much training economy.
Correct.
You're going to get the most leverage out of that or the other thing.
Right.
But yeah.
And I am sensitive generally to, like, training videos that professional athletes post because there's always a motivation behind them. Mm-hmm. Whether it's like to promote their trainer, their specific trainer that they're paying, or like a training method that they get off of, they make money off of, or whatever it is. Like professional athletes train so hard, and if they're posting a snip of what they're doing, I always am going to immediately wonder why did they only post that snip. Sure. And like sometimes maybe it isn't. I don't think it's ever like super negative reasons or trying to hurt kids or anything. Yeah. But like maybe sometimes they're just like, hey, I tried this and this was cool.
Yeah.
As opposed to like trying to promote a product, which is fine. But like the two things I think of are one, the constant, like every summer you get the videos of Ben Simmons shooting threes. And it's like, it doesn't mean anything.
No.
Great, you can make a couple threes in a gym when no one's guarding you. You still refuse to take them in games, but like teams fall for it every year, or fans fall for it every year, or whatever.
Yeah.
Because you're only seeing a very small picture of what actually is going on behind the scenes, and the behind the scenes is what actually makes the athlete.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of kids, especially kids, can see these things and start to think that that's all they need to do, or that it's like that superficial, and it doesn't come along with hours of work every week, every day.
Yeah.
And like, here's a minute and a half of what I did.
Yeah.
Even though the other 6 hours and 58 minutes aren't on film. And the other thing I think of is Joe Burrow, because there was like a couple years ago in a press conference, they asked him about like posting, like you didn't post any off-season training content. He's like, why would I do that? I don't train for other people. Like I train for me. I don't train for other people. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of how I have my experience with professional athletes has kind of been that.
Yeah.
That like, I don't care. If I'm going to post something online, I have an ulterior motive to do that.
Sure.
Like I'm not just going to post me training online and be like, getting after it. Like no professional athlete does that anymore. No. They're monetized platforms.
Yep.
And if they're posting something on the platform,
they've got an incentive.
Yeah, there's an incentive there, and start to think about what that motivation is, and like not just taking what you're seeing at face value.
Yeah.
And like that's so difficult with kids.
Yeah.
And like they see so many of these, you know, Danny can be on Instagram for 10 minutes and see 15 of these different training videos or ads or whatever it is. And like how to, you know, just he thinks they're all good. And like that's someone who like has access to resources.
Yeah, I mean, and
there's a lot of kids who have that thought without access to those resources and are probably buying water bags offline.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm just fortunate that like these are conversations that he still wants to have with me, you know, because like I'm well aware that there could be a world where, you know, he's not interested in having that conversation, and then I'm not able to provide him a little.
And you just
bit
go down
more.
to the basement and see him swinging with a water bag.
And I was like, God bless America.
Or he doesn't want to ask you about buying them, so he just decides to make his own water bags. And then you have a flood in the basement.
Yeah. Necessity being the mother of invention, et cetera, et cetera. Well, from parts of training that are not commonly discussed, segue alert, we're going to talk about command.
Phenomenal segue. That is an 80 grade segue.
Hey, we've been doing this for a couple years.
We have been.
I mean, if we weren't kind of semi good at this, I'd be a little embarrassed.
That's the 80th of the grades that you've ever gotten on segues, though.
No, we wanted to talk about command. For anybody that follows like the Big Boy Driveline social media, you should be following us at Driveline Youth, Driveline Youth, Driveline Youth. Please follow. We're getting close to 5,000 followers across all of our channels, which is a great number. And then you realize we've done over 700,000 impressions in the last like 30 days, and somehow the follower count and the impressions don't add up. So if you're a fan of the pod and you're not following us on all the platforms, we would appreciate that. That aside, if you follow the Big Boy Driveline socials, we've talked a lot in the last few weeks about Training 2.0. Training 2.0 is basically kind of a concept that encapsulates a lot of the changes that we've made to training over the last year, maybe a little bit more than that. And one of those things is the development of what we called intended zones, otherwise known as IZs. I've seen some people call it ITZs. It's for sure just IZs, right? It's intended zones.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm only smiling because I saw you put it as ITZ in the Academy Slack, and I was like, I don't know that I've ever seen it as ITZ before. I was like, is that wrong? And I was like, no, it is like intended. Like I see where the IT comes from. But yeah, we just call it IZ. Yeah.
I always called it IZs, and I think like Mike called it ITZs, and that just got in my brain. And then this morning I was like, no, it's just, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Intended zones.
It doesn't not make it. It makes more sense than like IZT.
Yeah, that would
TIZ, you know, but like, IZ makes the most sense.
So one of those things is intended zones. And if you're joining us on an audiovisual platform, you're probably not gaining anything here other than you would if you're just listening to us, because I don't have like a screen. I mean, I guess I could cut in some of the video we've got from IZ sessions. Maybe you'll find that it's going to depend on how much time I have to edit this thing or not. But I think it's important to kind of describe the system and the intention and the training concept behind intended zones.
Yeah.
So if you follow Driveline for years, you've known that we've had like a command differential set that we've sold of balls, leather-weighted baseballs that are heavier and lighter than a standard 9-inch circumference 5-ounce baseball, but then also smaller and larger. And that's something that we've had on sale for a while. I've got like a +5 6-ounce and a -5 4 in my bag that Danny and I used to just do catch play with. Yeah. And the thought there is really relies on some existing research about the idea of proprioceptive development and the other concept that kind of trails with that of contextual interference. And the general stuff that was substantiated here, and I'm trying to break this down. Again, I'm not a doctor, not a scientist, just a dummy that's read a lot of stuff. I think is simple enough to understand. And just to keep this like in a baseball specific context, right? If you were a kid who like started swinging a bat at like 2 or 3 years old, or throwing a baseball at 2 or 3 years old, fun fact, the same ball that you would pick up and throw at 2 or 3 years old is the same ball that you'll be when you're 32 or 33 years old. Like the ball weight doesn't change, the size doesn't change. I have some thoughts about that, but that's a different topic for a different day. And what we seem to think is happening in the brain is that, like, if you get super accustomed to picking up this implement, right, at a certain point, my brain just kind of turns off when I go to execute the task, right? It's like, it's almost executed autonomously, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, except if you need to have additional like pattern refinement imposed upon you about the way that you execute that task. So I think hopefully this is all like plain enough language to make this make sense. And the thought is that if you add some differential instruments to the equation, things like longer bats or shorter bats or heavier bats, or on the throwing side, balls that are heavier, balls that are lighter, balls that are lighter and smaller, balls that are heavier and larger, the brain responds by going, aha, this is not the same as that thing that I've had on my hand since I was 2 years old.
Right.
And because of that, the rate of skill acquisition should go up, because what they call the arousal rate in the brain. And I realized that, like, I don't know who the researcher was that came up with the idea that we're going to describe like the brain's, I don't know, attention rate as an arousal. I don't know why that was decided. Like when I sent a friend of the program, Jordan Baltimore of New York Empire Baseball, when I sent him my first version of the book, one of the first like 3 chapters that were done had the chapter about skill acquisitions. We have to talk about arousal rate. And he was like, I know, because I've read the research, that they call it arousal rate. We got to call it something different. And I don't necessarily disagree. But
it's possible that term existed before the other arousal term.
Yeah, well, sure, that's possible.
Probable, actually.
Yeah. So anyways, the arousal rate of the brain goes up when you're performing the task. And if that's true, then like the rate of skill acquisition should go up.
Now you don't have to read Hacking the Kinetic Chain.
I just gave it to you.
That's the hack.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you ever wondered why it's called hacky, we are hacking into the brain to increase the rate of acquisition.
Right.
Of skill acquisition.
So that's some stuff that's been in the equation for a while. We've had the command differential set. But the other thing that we seem to have some pretty good signal on is it's difficult to, like, no one's really like solved command. You know, I think you could make the argument that training with overload underload balls more often than not is going to increase arm strength. It's going to increase pattern efficiency, and the result of both of those things are going to increase velocity. And I think you can make the argument that we've kind of just solved that, in so much as I am using like solved with a lot of air quotes there. Because again, doing that to the maximum also entails the consistent application not only of that training modality, but of all the other athletic development stuff underneath. Insert everything I was talking about why you can't forego general athletic development and just slap a water bag on your kid and think that they're going to get as good as they can be. Okay. But the thing we seem to understand with command is that, like, you have to be highly intentional about it kind of all the time. Which is different than, I think, the way that we've always trained throwing, right? Like, I don't know that we've always, and by always, I'm thinking like pre-2018.
Sure. I think my hot-ish take is that the way we're trying to train command is the same way that every old baseball coach has ever tried to train command, with one relatively large difference.
Yeah.
Or I guess 2 large differences. One, we are tracking it, which is a thing that most like old head coaches just never did.
Yep.
And if you can track it and show someone's improvement or not over time, you have an idea of whether or not you're actually improving that person's command. And like, I think that's one big difference. And the other big difference is most of the time, older baseball coaches were under the impression that in order to practice command, you had to throw it less hard.
Right. And that was for sure a coach. Like that was the way that it was taught.
Right. And it's like those two things combined of like, you have to throw it less hard if you want to command it. And we're not going to like actually track with any kind of longevity or consistency your ability to command a baseball. So like, I can't tell you if you're getting better at this or if you're getting worse at it. All I can tell you is that you have to throw slower if you want to command it.
Right. And I think that's a critical thing to kind of talk about. The intention behind IZs for us is to be able to quantify command.
Right.
Because it allows us to quantify miss distance. And I guess this is the point where we can kind of talk about like the way that the thing functions, which is kind of like a video game. right? You have a screen, and that screen has a 9 zone on it, and it also has a list of different pitch types. So when our kids are throwing IZ bullpens, what they're doing is that they go up to that screen, they pick the pitch that they're going to throw, they indicate the location they're trying to throw it at on the 9 pocket, and then they have on the 9 pocket literally has a projection of the actual target that they've intended. So now the athlete has both the intention on the screen that they can touch, and then on the 9 pocket that they're actually throwing to, exactly like there's a glove that pops up.
Right.
And then from that, you just throw the pitch.
Right.
And when you throw the pitch, we get a couple things going on. The TrackMan is going to get us all the thrown ball spin metrics that we could potentially ask for. You can grade that pitch relative to its performance in that regard. Did the cutter cut the way that it's supposed to cut? Did the fastball ride the way we want it to ride? Did the slider move horizontally the way, etc.? But then you can also calculate the distance between where that pitch landed and where it was intended to land, hence intended zones.
Right. And you can see if you're getting better over time if you have less missed distance with one grip than another grip with a specific pitch type, if the other metrics grade out similarly. There's a lot of cool uses to it, but I do think the biggest thing about the system is that we're just tracking it.
Yeah.
That's the biggest difference, right? Like, other than that, it's really a scripted bullpen.
Yes.
And sometimes we can make that script for the athlete, or sometimes the athlete can choose that script for themselves. I think with the kids specifically, constantly, when you have kids, especially in our setting where they're not throwing, the majority of their throwing isn't outside and actually to a catch partner.
Right.
It's to a net or a wall or something like that. All the time, you can ask them where their target was, and it's just like the mat or the net, like a massive, massive target. And what we are trying to get the kids to focus on, and what most old baseball coaches are trying to get the pitchers to focus on, is a much more specific, smaller target.
I mean, that was the other thing that, like they said, simultaneous to the, like, well, you can't possibly throw hard and then throw with command, miss small, right? That was a teach.
Right. And to miss small, we believe you have to aim small.
Yes.
If you're going to miss small.
Yeah.
And so the intended zones is a way for us to consistently get kids to aim small, as opposed to picking out, I'm going to just hit the net.
Yeah.
Because like if you're trying to hit a 10 by 10 net and you miss, Jesus, that was a terrible throw. But like you're not getting any better by just hitting random spots on the net.
Right.
You're not going to like actually improve your ability to throw consistently to a target if you have a giant target consistently.
Right.
So like we have kids throw at a 9 pocket on every time they're in here. They're throwing at a 9 pocket. I would venture a guess that 95% of the time they're throwing to that 9 pocket, not in the intended zones cage, in just the regular cage, they don't have a target. A 1 through 9 target that they're trying to hit on the 9 pocket.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to hit the 9 pocket.
Yeah.
Right, throwing in that general vicinity. And like as much as you tell them, they're gonna, and part of this is like muscle memory, part of this is, hey, I'm chatting with my teammate, I'm in the flow of things or whatever. Yeah. Eventually they're gonna lose focus and stop. Even if they start with a picked target, they're gonna lose focus, and most athletes are not gonna wind up with a target picked for the majority of their throws.
Yeah.
If I could force them to do that, I would. That's what intended zones does.
Yeah,
it forces them to pick that target and then throw to that target, and they can see over time, am I getting better at throwing to that specific target? And maybe it's, hey, you're way more accurate with your fastball to your arm side than you are to your glove side.
Right.
Your missed distance when you aim arm side is way lower than when you aim glove side. So like now that helps us gain some clarity on you as a pitcher, and A, what you need to work on, and B, what you should kind of lean into when you are actually in a game, things like that. So there are a lot of other benefits that come with intended zones, but like for people who think that we're changing the game on command training, all we're doing is quantifying what generally has been done for a very long time.
Yeah.
And it just never has been quantified.
Yeah.
It's just like pick a target, have intention about your target, and then track how much you missed it by.
Yeah. And I think the thing that we can bring to this for the youth space is like, look, if you are not working or training at one of the 3 Driveline facilities in the known universe, you don't have access to this technology. However, if you have a 9 pocket, I think you can get decently close. You just have to change the way that you're running these pens, right? So, like, imagine you're throwing a bullpen with a child that's 11 years old. Now, first of all, when it comes to competition, I will continue to regurgitate the same thing that I've said for many a moon here, which is that, like, in competition, I just want you to throw it hard in and around the zone. And I am intentional about in and around being a location you can get away with if it's thrown hard. Because of what I know about not only the need for kids to learn how to throw with intent, but also weaponizing the fact that, like, 11-year-old hitters aren't that good. They're going to chase stuff, right? And I mean, look, all hitters are subject to that truth. You know, like Rod Friedman that runs the Pitching Ninja, that has millions and millions of followers because Rob's the man, posted some video from behind home plate the other day of Bob Feller. And there wasn't a radar gun. So he's like, how hard do you think this was? And a bunch of people were commenting that, like, it looks, you know, maybe 95, 96-ish, maybe a 7. And I think that's probably fair. I think Feller was for sure like a mid to upper 9s guy. Was Bob Feller throwing 104? No. But like mid 9s, I'll buy that all day. But in the clip, you can watch, their guys are just chasing stuff that's like 3 baseballs outside of the zone. These are professional hitters because it's really firm. Yeah. Like Bob Feller throwing mid to upper 9s at that time might as well be 104.
Yeah, I mean, just look at every day during the regular season, the Pitching Ninja has a million swords that are on there. These are professional hitters who have a lot of data available to them and video available to them and still get fooled that badly.
Yep. And then, you know, and there's going to be some, you know, dummy in the comments, I don't know why they're swinging. And then, fortunately, thank God for Rob Friedman,
the overlays.
He has the overlay where you can see.
I think that has removed a lot of the, I don't know why they swung at that. Because when I was younger, it was like embarrassing to get sorted as a batter. And I still think that that is true in some fashion.
Sure.
But it has flipped, in my opinion, and I feel like now it's more of a positive for the pitcher than a negative for the hitter.
Yeah.
And it's more like, oh, that was a nasty pitch, as opposed to like, why would you swing at that? You're a terrible hitter. Like,
yeah.
Which is a good thing that it flipped.
Yeah, 100%. So anyways, I think the thing to understand here is that, like, in competition, I'm still leaning on what I think is both game theory optimal and developmentally optimal. Let it eat in and around the zone. And I'm fine with that. But in training, that's a different thing. So yeah, we have the luxury of having intended zones where we can throw this bullpen and we can quantify miss distance per pitch type, etc. If you have kids throwing plyos on a plyo wall and you don't have them throwing to a target, you're doing it wrong.
Yep.
You have to set up an arm side, head high target, and somebody should be doing some type of spot check on some type of recurring basis about what that looks like from an accuracy perspective.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be, you know, it doesn't have to be negative.
Yeah.
Hey, where was the target there?
Yep.
Like, you don't have to, that was a terrible throw, or where are you throwing to, or whatever. Like, where are we aiming for? Make sure you have a target. Make sure, like, you know, call it out before you throw it.
Yeah.
Call the number on the 9 pocket out before you throw it.
Yep.
This is like, you know, again, you talked about doing like tracking this in a low tech way. Yeah, if you have a 9 pocket, you can go 1 through 9. If I'm aiming for number 9, it's a -1 or whatever if I hit an 8, a 5, or a 6. It's a -2 if I go one layer further from that. It's a -3 if I go another layer, whatever it is.
Yes.
And then you can quantify that at the end of practice.
Yeah.
How close are you to 0? Are you positive?
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's an easy thing to quantify.
Yep.
And that's basically all we're doing in like a very high-tech way that we don't have to lift the finger.
Yep.
And it's not just like, oh, you missed by 1 level. It's like, oh, you missed by 5.2 inches.
Yep.
Like, it's much easier to do it, but you don't have to have all this technology available to you. We're taking a relatively simple concept and just making it easier to track and look at over the long term.
Yep. And to your exact point, if you've got an actual 9 pocket, the way that I would run a pen, like if we had to do this in my house, I would have a 9 pocket and I would have 9 baseballs. And hey, you know, the workload we're trying to shoot for today is we're going to try to throw a 40 pitch pen. Well, we're going to do this in 4 sets of 9, right? So we're going to have 36 plus some spare change. But I would constrain it to 9 baseballs. And at the end of throwing those 9, I would go out there and I would make for every pitch that kid has to throw, call out a location, and then score it at the end of the 9.
Yeah.
Hey, 7 out of the 9, 6 of the 9, 5 of the 9. You can get more exotic with, like, I think, hey, if 1, 4, and 7 are all like the left side, right? And we're shooting outer third fastballs, right? Sure, it's a -1 if you're on the 2, 5, and the 8, right? And it's a -3 if you're on the 3, the 6, and the 9. You can do all that, or you could just like score the positive, right? You could take the same concepts that we have the luxury of having technology solve for us with intended zones with a 9 pocket and 9 baseballs. Score your bullpens,
right?
Just score them,
right? This is, I mean, you talked about like how the bats and the product, like a lot of the equipment that we use started because like we needed it.
Yep.
So we made it. And like that's what intended zones is. Like we wanted to quantify command and have a better way to quantify and train command.
Yep.
And that started with, I mean, the better way to train command started with the better way to quantify command.
Yeah.
And it was like, there's not really a better way to quantify command than just like throw a bullpen and chart every single pitch.
Yeah.
Where you wanted to throw it and where you wound up throwing it. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So we made it less work by letting the TrackMan do a lot of that stuff for us, but it's the same concept as charting a bullpen.
Yeah.
Where do you want to throw it? Where did you actually throw it? There's your bullpen. You can look at that over time and see like, oh, I got way better at hitting my targets after 3 months of charting my bullpen. Like, yeah, you're more focused on it. You're intentional about it.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And there's, again, that's why even in the old Skills at Scale book, right, we had catch games in there and long toss games that revolve around points for targets.
Right.
If you're not extending that idea into the bullpen, then you're missing an opportunity to layer that much more consistency of intention into the overall training environment to the point that it's synonymous with throwing as you should have a small target.
Right.
And that's what it should be. Now, it's not always going to go perfect, right? It's not. You're also not going to have. I mean, I've asked that question that you just said. Where's your target? Of kids on our plyo wall that have been with us for like 4 years, because kids are kids. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they get non-intentional about stuff and they just go through the motions, and that's totally fine.
I ask it almost every practice, and I have for years.
Right. So
and I still get it, like, and I know these kids well enough now that like I can watch them make a throw and be like, yeah, they were definitely not aiming anywhere. That was like, I'm going to pick up a ball and just wing it towards the net, and I'll ask them, and I know the answer.
Yeah. But point being that like, yeah, you're going to have to reiterate this stuff. You're going to have to burn some calories to try to keep that intention a little bit more consistent. But if you do that, now you should have simple systems that aren't predicated on you having a Garrett York and an R&D team that can build us intended zones.
Right.
You've got a 9 pocket, or you have a wall with some stickers on it.
Right.
Like that's literally it is, and you have a piece of paper and a pen.
Yep. And like, it's one of the benefits that I really feel strongly about with the intended zones, and you could do this with just like charting a bullpen, is the confidence it can give a pitcher in certain pitches.
Yeah.
And in certain situations that like, all right, I know I'm pretty accurate with my fastball here. And like the conviction is the biggest part of every pitch that's thrown. Yep. And if an athlete feels a little bit more confident in their ability to command the ball because they have data saying, hey, I've gotten better at commanding a baseball.
Yeah.
It's probably just going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, and they're going to be better at commanding a baseball in games if they just feel a little bit more confident in their ability to throw the baseball.
Yeah, and then when you start to think about layering that type of foundation and confidence into a young athlete, I can tell you what this looks like as they start to get a little bit older. And we've talked about this, I think, on the podcast before. Like, a lot of these kids that I don't know if this is just our kids. I don't know if it's because of the systems. I don't know if it's because of MLB The Show. But like the old rules about pitch sequencing are dead. They're just dead. Like I'm seeing kids who are just like, look, and I understand that like a lot of my bias is my own kid, right? But like I remember, we were on a bus, when we were doing the Italy thing last summer, and I was like, all right, so like 3-2, 2 down, bases full. Like, what are you throwing? And he was like, I'm throwing a slider. I It's like really? He's like, yeah, because he believes that he can land that pitch. So the point,
yes, in that scenario. However, I would argue that in a 2-strike scenario, most people always would go, I'm going to try to throw my nastiest pitch or whatever.
Sure.
I do still think, even with our kids, because I let them call their own pitches, we are way too fastball heavy.
Yeah.
And like we still haven't seen that actual shift that has happened at the college and pro level of like, if your fastball is your best pitch, sure, be fastball heavy. You should just be heavy on whatever your best pitch is.
Yeah.
If it's not your fastball, don't throw your fastball the majority of the time.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know that we have a ton of academy kids whose best pitch isn't their fastball. When you're younger, it's probably going to be your best pitch. But there's a couple I can think of that like, hey man, you should probably throw like 70% breaking ball. And then when you do throw a fastball, it's going to be so much more, it's going to play up so much more. Yeah. And I don't think that piece has quite gotten there with kids. In terms of like the sequencing,
I think we're going to see it in the next couple of years. I'm hedging my bets a little bit. I think we're going to see a version of a kid like Christian Nash. If Christian Nash is like 60-40, 70-30 on that curveball.
I mean, he was one I was thinking of.
Yeah. Like
he was not more, he was fastball dominant last year.
I think some of that might have to do with his high school coaching.
For sure. But like that's a factor that's in this,
yes,
right?
For sure.
And there's still a decent amount of coaches out there who think like breaking balls are bad for your arm or like throwing that many of them is not good or whatever the case may be. But I do think it's very like, yes, we are making advancements, but it's very, very, it's still, we're early stages in terms of like kids at the lower levels understanding that. And also, I think one of the negative side effects, if I can, of LMB the show is every kid thinks they can throw like 7 different pitch types.
Yeah. No,
and it's like, no, don't do that though.
Yeah.
Like throw 2.
Yeah.
And if they're both really good, then you can add a third. Yeah. But like, there's no point in throwing 4 crappy pitches.
That's the thing. That's the thing I love about the dummies who are like Greg Maddox, and they always spell Maddox's last name wrong.
Yeah, with an O. Yeah.
They always spell it with an O. Greg Maddox. He wouldn't get drafted today. My brother. Not only did that guy throw top shelf velo for his age, but he had like 3+ pitches.
Right.
Well, what are we talking about?
Yeah, and relative to his competition, it would be like a high schooler now throwing 97, 98.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You're going to get drafted.
Yeah, the kid's going to be just fine. Kid's going to be just fine.
Yeah.
And I think the only other thing we want to just talk briefly about in terms of this idea of command is the fact that, again, the old thing about like, well, to get better at the task of throwing accurately, you just have to throw slower. We're finding some kids who are just like definitively prove that that's not true. We have kids that are throwing throwing harder and demonstrably cutting their walk rate.
Yeah, we have never asked a kid to throw less hard in a bullpen here.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's some bullpens there are a handful of B-day bullpens where we're asking kids to stay around 70%. Yeah. Most of our bullpens are going to be A-days or higher where we're like, you're 85, 90% or more of your RP in this bullpen session, and we still work on command. We just don't ever ask our kids to throw harder or throw less hard because then they're practicing a different thing.
Yeah,
that they're not practicing the thing that they're going to do in a mound in a game. And the old adage of like, oh, just like take some off and throw strikes.
Get it over.
Like, as a coach, you're probably also maybe even probably more upset at the kid hitting a 3-run homer because you just threw it 10 miles an hour slower and you threw it right down the middle. And like, would you rather him give up a barrel or him slightly miss the zone and get better at missing the zone?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I mean, I'm pretty convicted that the path there, from everything I understand about the research, you have to get good at moving fast.
Yeah.
Like that.
And don't train it separately.
Yeah. Like you have to. And again, so if you have the luxury of doing a snapshot or being a Driveline Academy Flex member, sure, you can come in and throw an IZ pen. But if you have a 9 pocket or you have a wall with stickers on it, you can literally apply these same concepts. You can apply the same concept in an L screen. If you have one of those box nets at home that all of us have off of Amazon, they make like a 9 pocket thing that just like mounts to the edges of it. They're super cheap on Amazon. Now you have targets.
Get a pitch back.
Yeah.
Right? And if you throw it too high, it hits a grounder back at you. If you throw it too low, it hits a fly ball back at you. So, like, you can it goes to the left or right. So you can, like, based on the way it returns to you, you can start to chart, okay, this is the pitch I threw, and this is the way it got returned to me from a pitch back. And, like, oh, now I have an idea of, like, did I get better over the last month of hitting my spot on the pitch back because I've had less fly balls at me or whatever.
Yeah.
There's ways to do this that are low tech.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that I don't have to do any of those because that is a significant amount of work.
Yeah, you're going to burn some more calories for sure.
And this is a much nicer setup to just they touch a spot on an iPad and throw a ball and they get all the metrics.
But if you're doing pens and you're literally like standing behind a kid and they're throwing to a 9 pocket, you just need a pad and a piece of paper. Those are the calories you need to burn.
Right.
It's not a gigantic lift.
Right. And where were you? And asking them before they throw.
Yep.
Where are you aiming?
Yep.
Where are we going? When I worked at I could probably say their name, Inside Edge Scouting Services. I worked at Inside Edge. And
one of the many greats to come out of that company.
One of the many Driveline greats.
People forget.
We had Pipeline from Inside Edge to Driveline at one point. But one of the things as my time was winding down there that we were doing was trying to figure out, I don't remember what we called it, but it might have been intended zones or like intended pitch or whatever it was.
Intended location.
Intended location, maybe that's what it was. Intended location. And we're going based off of where the catcher sets up and then where the actual pitch is. Mm-hmm. And I think that is still really the only big league command data that's available.
Yeah.
Because that's the best we have, is their intention is what we assume wherever the catcher is setting up. That might not be right.
Yeah.
There are many teams, go find them, they're the smart ones, who are setting up middle.
Yeah.
So, like, you're not even going to glean any information on where they're actually trying to throw it based on where their catcher is setting up. And it's a really hard thing to quantify if you don't know before the pitch the actual where are you intending to throw this.
Oh, I feel like a decent amount in the playoffs. You had pitches are going to be middle away, and the catcher is, like, very aggressively setting up in to start. And then halfway through the motion is sliding out.
Sliding, right.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to figure that out. And, like, one of the cooler parts, and, like, Christian Nash is a good one to bring up because I think still the Academy leader in missed distance.
It's like 3 inches?
No, it was like 8, I think.
Okay.
But, like, that is lower than big league average.
Yeah.
And that was also a huge piece for these kids is they don't like missing their location. Mm-hmm. By 2 inches, by 40 inches, by 120 inches, it has happened. We've had multiple over 100 inches. They don't like missing their location at all.
Yeah.
But quantifying that and saying, hey, in this bullpen, your average miss distance was like 13 inches. Doesn't feel great that I missed by over a foot on average.
Right.
And then they find out what the average big league miss distance is, and they feel a little bit better about themselves.
Yeah, I mean, when was it Verlander when he won the Cy the first time? His average miss distance was like 14 inches or something like that.
It's probably true.
Yeah, 14 or 16. Like I mean,
it's probably true.
Look it up.
Go look it up. Like the average big league miss distance is higher than you would expect. And again, it's slightly flawed because we don't actually know where they're intending to throw each pitch. We don't actually have that data.
And it's an average, right?
And it's an average. Because, like, that's the other thing that you can get into trouble with intended zones, right? If I say I'm going to throw 3 fastballs at it, like, just straight down the middle of the plate, one is 40 inches below the plate, one is 40 inches above the plate, and the other one I nail. It's going to look like I nailed all 3, and my average is perfect.
Yeah.
Where really I was extremely inconsistent.
Averages are tricky.
Averages are tricky with that. So chart each pitch individually. But you can do this without a lot of tech.
Yeah, and I think the only other thing that I would say here is, Jeremy talked about the fact that, like, when we're doing this work, we have sometimes our B-day pens would be on intended zones, but largely it's what we would call an A-day. So let's just imagine that's 85 to 90-ish intent in terms of RPE, rate of perceived exertion. The nice thing about this system, whether it's intended zones here and you have all of our tech, or whether you've got a 9 pocket in your charting, is you can help a kid find the feel for, like, what is their competitive level of intent that allows them to maximize velocity but also maximize command, right? Is it Is it 80%? Is it 85%? Is it 90? Is it 95%? I, as a coach, have no business dictating what that should be for the athlete. They need to discover that. So you got to kind of walk them through. Like I had a kid in the Little League days many, many moons ago. He was taller than I was, weighed like 125 pounds. He was rail thin, but like long levers. And he would get on a 46-foot mound, and it looked like he was throwing at these kids from like the distance from me to you. Like he's just literally on top of them. Yeah. Had zero idea where the ball was going. Like truly none. And we would be at practice and literally following basically like the rudimentary version of the team training stuff that's in the Skills to Scale book, because this was 6 years ago or whatever. And we would do pens, and I would be like, all right, like let's start at 80. Well, let's start at 80%. And in a set of 8 pitches, it'd be like 4 that got zooed up the backstop and maybe at one of the other dugouts. Like it'd be, the spray pattern was wild. Yeah. And then 4 would be in and around the zone and be like, okay, well, in my heart of hearts, do I feel good about the fact that 50% of these pitches got sprayed? No, but I also see that like the other 50%, that's a punchy, right? Like if we don't hit that kid, if we don't hit him, if we don't mortally wound the umpire, and then he or she gets pissed off and decides they're not going to call strikes for us, we just got a punchy there. So it's like, okay, cool. I'm recognizing this is like a 12-year-old kid that needs to work on the skill of getting better at moving fast. So if I tell him, well, hey, let's downregulate to 75%, number one, there's a bunch of existing research out there that strictly proves the point that like kids' stated level of rate of perceived exertion and their actual rate of perceived exertion, those things don't map. So the tricky thing to understand is that like you might tell a kid, hey, like dial it down to 75, but 75 might in actuality be 60%, or it might be 65%, and now we're falling outside of like not only the competition bounds of what's going to play, but also falling outside of like the skill acquisition that we need to work on, which is get good at moving fast. Right. So it'd be like, Robbie, show me what 82% looks like. Okay, well, let's do another set of 8. And if we were on a day where at 82%, Robbie was showing me like 6 out of 8 strikes or 5 out of 8 strikes, it's like, man, if we're doing this on a Monday practice and I'm going to line Robbie up to pitch on Saturday, we're going to be in a good place. I mean, he's a 12-year-old kid, so God knows what's going to happen between Monday and Saturday, but like we'd be in a good place. Or I would have other kids. It's like this kid Travis that I had for years and years. Trav worked best at like 90%, but he would get to the point where like 95% and up would just zoo completely not play. Yep. And 80% was so slow that it was like this thing. Point being that this RPE thing is real finicky when you're talking about coaching kids to try to get them to map that to what actually works. If you have the ability to layer in something like Pocket Radar to your training environment, that would be another thing that you can chart, right? Is it like, hey, today's going to be, the first set's going to be 80%. Average velo was 68 miles an hour, and we landed 70% strikes or whatever. Okay, well, now can we get to 72 and still be at a competitive number of strikes? These are all questions that you can ask if you have a pad of paper, you have a pen, you have a 9 pocket, and maybe you're layering in a radar. Yeah. And it's just going to make your bullpens way, way, way better. You're going to get way more valuable signal to the kids that you're training about what's working and trying to help them figure out, hey, am I an 83% guy? Like I've literally, I mean, when I was coaching kids that were even younger, I'd be in the dugout, be like, show me 82%. I mean, I don't know what 82% is. The kid doesn't know.
Our rallying cry 2 years ago was 80.
Yeah.
Because, and I don't say it anymore, but I used to tell them 80% is how I want you to play in games, knowing that, the adrenaline's going to take over and it's probably going to be much, much closer to 100. But me telling them 80 was getting them to focus a little bit more on the task as opposed to like just doing it as fast as possible. And I stopped saying that because, some of the kids were slowing themselves down too much when I would say 80.
Yeah.
And, like, it's not good for you. It's the opposite of what I was trying to get out of this. So I don't say that anymore.
Yeah.
But, like, that was a thing I said for a whole season when they were 14.
Yeah, I mean, and it's, I think the point here is that, like, it's a tricky thing for the athlete to find the feel for, like, what's going to allow them to be the most competitive. I think it's as trickier, if not more so, as the coach to try to dictate that. So if that's true, I think there's a lot of meat on the bone of, like, just helping them discover the path, which starts with you collecting better information as a coach.
Yep.
You getting better signal to them about what's working, about what's not working. You can help them build off of that. Then you're able to, like, hey, the bullpen on Wednesday this week, we know has a different value than the one the week before. Instead of just, I got on the mound and I threw some pitches.
Right.
Like, sure, I mean, great, but you can do better. Yeah. You can 100%. Do better. So yeah, if you want to get some of that action, you're close enough to a Driveline facility. We got that work. If you just have a 9-pocket or some stickers on a plyo wall and a piece of paper and a pen, man, you can make these things a heck of a lot more actionable. Big command guys over here. Mm-hmm. Big command guys. Ball. Shout out to anybody that gets that reference. You got anything else?
I got nothing else.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about the Bears game yesterday.
No. I'm good with the draft pick.
Yeah.
We're getting that high draft pick. That's what I wanted, anyways.
Yeah.
Once you go to 4-8.
Yeah, you're playing for the future.
Yeah, you need 10 wins to make the playoffs in the NFL at this point. And, like, once you have lost yourself out of 10 wins, just tank for the draft pick at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So, anyways, that's all we got. We got a little bit of a shorter episode for you guys today. We started a little bit late. We got meetings and whatnot. As per usual, axbat.com, code DEAL20, Domino, Legolas 20. I don't know. I actually know why, because when I go into the HBO
I was just going to say the market. There's some sort of marketing that's working right now.
When I go into the Max app, so that my daughter and I and my wife can watch the Dune, the TV show. Sure. They're doing their holiday push for all, like, their series, and it's like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. That's where it came from.
I was going to say, because I would think it would be you'd open Amazon Prime. Because they have the Lord of the Rings TV show. And that's where you'd see, like, the ads for it.
Could be there, too. Amazon Prime is, like, my late night. I need to turn on something. Like, I need to turn on, like, some stupid movie that I've seen a million times and fall asleep to. And,
sure.
And then it's like I'm, watching some Jean-Claude Van Damme classic at, like, 11 o'clock at night. And Universal Shoulder or something equally terrible. Yeah.
That's why I watched Elf this weekend.
Yeah. Been there, done that. Although we're not watching anything other than Yellowstone at this point. Getting caught up. Don't spoil me on anything.
How far are you?
We just got into season. We're like season 2, episode 5 or something like that.
That's so. I can't say anything.
That
was years ago. I don't remember what's going on.
Well, this is the problem. I looked down my nose at that show and I was like, wait. But Taylor Sheridan, like, wrote Sicario, and Sicario was really good. He's wrote some other stuff that was really good. Maybe we should watch it. Then it turns out that, like, Kevin Costner's amazing in it, and I don't know. Anyways, we're there now. If the wife and I could do nothing but just, like, hammer Yellowstone through January, I'm sure that both of us would take the PTO to get it done. But
welcome to Dutton Ranch.
I know. We're in it. We're in it. So yeah. Aside from our TV musings, you got the Axbat stuff, you got the codes, you got all of our stuff is on. I'm sure we're going to be doing additional sales. The big thing is just like the winter holiday thing for snapshots. We're cutting the price in half. We just want more people to come in and check this thing out, and then go talk to other people and tell them how amazing it is that you're able to get this insight and plot this course for, like, the things you need in order to help your kids stay competitive and love baseball, because I think that's a pretty cool thing that we can offer. So we're doing it for half off during the winter break from December 23rd to January 5th. So you can go to drivelinebaseball.com, support at drivelinebaseball.com, 425-523-4030. We'll hook you up. He is Jeremy. I'm Devin. We're done by Law Kitchen next time. Thanks. Bye.